Chapter 79. This venerable one's shizun is an actor. If Moran hadn't known Chu Wanning like the back of his own hand, he feared he might have been taken in by his serious demeanor and believed that nonsense. Chiasini was Chu Wanning's son? Yeah, right. Like he was dumb enough to fall for that. However, it wasn't like he could brush off his shizun. So, in the days that followed, he simply played along, putting on a show with things like, "Oh heavens, so that's how it is. I can't believe shizun is actually a playboy," and other such. Moran had to admit that it was an interesting time, even though he had no idea what Chu Wanning was up to. Thus, Moran made a sport of it, poking playfully at Chu Wanning every so often. One time, as they stopped at a tea house for a snack, Moran called out, cheek in hand, eyes bright and round, "Shizun, shizun!" Chu Wanning swallowed his tea before lifting his lashes to look evenly at him. Why won't you acknowledge Chiashidi as your child?" "It's not that I won't acknowledge him. It just isn't the right time." Chu Wanning replied. "Then when will it be the right time?" "That will depend on him." Chu Wanning had such an air of profundity that Moran's ribs hurt from holding in his laughter, even as he forced himself to put on his best pitying face. Poor Chiashidi. Another time, as they were traveling side by side on horseback, Moran reached up and snapped a willow branch while passing by. He was fresh out of distractions and bored out of his mind, so he fussed at Chu Wanning again. "Shizun, shizun!" "What is it?" "Can I ask you something?" Moran was all smiles. "About Xinjiang. What kind of person is she? Is she pretty?" Chu Wanning choked, then hastily cleared his throat to cover for himself. "She's all right." "Huh? Just all right?" Moran said, shocked. "I was sure that someone who could catch Shizun's eye had to be devastatingly beautiful." Chu Wanning did not bother to reply. Moran steered his black horse closer to Chu Wanning's white one and asked slyly, "Is Shizun still keeping in touch with Xinjiang?" "How would I know that?" Chu Wanning threw him a chilly look and said darkly, "Your Xinjiang is dead." They'd barely started, and he was already offing his own wife. Moran almost choked on his own spit. "Dead? How did she die?" "Birth complications." Chu Wanning said expressionlessly. "That's so?" If the situation had been any different, Moran probably would have fallen off his horse from laughing too hard. Of course, Moran couldn't let such an amusing subject go. The next day, he washed a pouch full of fresh, plump cherries before setting off to entice Chu Wanning into talking some more on the way. "Shizun, can I know who Xinjiang was? What's her name?" Chu Wanning picked a cherry and ate it with no discernible reaction. "She's already passed," he said indifferently. "What's the use in knowing her name?" Moran didn't miss a beat. "The sect leader has always taught us to be filial. Even if Xinjiang is no longer with us, I, as a disciple, should still remember her name and go pay my respects every winter solstice and Qingming." Chu Wanning kept eating his cherries. "No need," he replied evenly. "Your Xinjiang was not the worldly sort, and she also disliked the smell of incense." Moran pursed his lips, rolling his eyes. "It's obvious that you couldn't make up a backstory for Xinjiang on the fly. Can't believe you'd say she never cared for these things with such a serious face." Outwardly, he kept smiling. If Xinjiang was so refined, she must have been a cultivator too. Chu Wanning paused, then picked another cherry between snow-white fingertips and ate it at his leisure before answering. "Correct." Moran blinked curiously. "Which sect was she from?" Chu Wanning estimated Chiasini's age and quickly calculated in his head that he would have still been at Linyi at the time, so he said evenly, "Rufeng sect." "Oh." Moran's eyebrows went up slightly. He had to give Chu Wanning props for that. Rufeng sect had always favored male disciples. Although their female disciples received the same education, They were never given the same opportunities to stand out and make a name for themselves. In fact, they never even left their names when they went on missions, so even though the female cultivators of Rufang sect were no less accomplished than the rest of the world only knew them as the female cultivators of Rufang sect. No one knew their individual names. This, Chu Wanning could make up whatever he felt like, and there would be absolutely no way to verify. Moran wasn't one to surrender. He perked back up and persisted. Then when did Shizun and Xinjiang meet? How did you two meet? Chu Wanning hesitated, not quite up to the task of inventing all that on the spot. When his gaze fell on Moran's bright, sparkly eyes, he suddenly realized that he didn't have an answer to this question. He pressed his lips together and with a sweep of his sleeve said sharply, "What are you doing, prying into this master's personal matters?" With that, he urged his horse on, white robes disappearing into the distance and leaving Moran in the dust. Chu Wanning and Moran roamed for a couple of weeks, visiting the markets at numerous smaller sects and checking every stall that sold weapons and spiritual stones, but they found absolutely nothing of note. One particular day, after Chu Wanning finished exchanging notes with Chue Chengyong via Haitang message, he and Moran set off from an inn and headed toward the market at Guiyue to continue their investigation. Guiyue was the foremost medicinal sect of the world, as well as the sect from which Chu Mang's mother, Madame Wang, hailed. The sect was built on an island named Rainbell Isle. It wasn't an actual island, but rather the back of an enormous tortoise that was thousands upon thousands of years old and bound to be the founder of the sect by blood pact. The tortoise carried the entire sect on its back as it traveled the oceans, and it nourished the flora of the isle with its unique spiritual energy. The disciples of Guiyue had always been enigmatic and removed from the rest of the world. The sect rarely ever interacted with outsiders. Only on the 1st and 15th day of each month would the tortoise dock at Yangzhou port, so that other sects could board and purchase medicines, while merchants could peddle their weapons, spiritual stones, and other wares that weren't usually found on the island itself. Yet, the most famous attraction on Rainbell Isle wasn't Guiyue, but Xuanyuan Pavilion. The pavilion was a subsidiary trading post of Guiyue, and it was well known throughout the cultivation world. This pavilion opened its doors twice per month to auction off goods like Guiyue's top-grade medicines and rare treasures from various sellers. The merchandise often toed the line of permissibility in terms of the cultivation world's taboos, but no one was so bored as to make an enemy of Guiyue. After all, most of the medicines circulating in the world originated at the sect. All things considered, Guiyue was no less powerful than the leading Rufang sect. "Put your hood up. Too many eyes." Chu Wanning quietly reminded Moran while tugging the hood of his own cloak lower. More and more people were arriving at Rainbell Isle. Xuanyuan Pavilion's auction house kept lavish private rooms for each of the great sects as a show of respect. However, since shady deals were made and stolen goods exchanged hands in this establishment, cultivators generally kept their identities hidden so as to not attract any undue attention or fatal misfortune. Moran and Chu Wanning stepped into Xuanyuan Pavilion. The interior was split into 3 floors, and the center of the first floor was occupied by a platform of white jade. The platform was shaped like a 9-petaled lotus flower, and it was enshrouded by 9 layers of impenetrable defensive barriers. This was where the merchandise would be displayed during the auction. Several hundred rows of redwood benches extended in the 4 cardinal directions around the white jade platform. These were the standard seats. The second floor held private booths, each with a large window made of golden cedar and a curtain of silver moon silk that allowed those within to clearly see out of it, but blocked sight from the outside in. These booths protected the privacy of the guests, but they were expensive. 9,000 gold for 2 hours. Chu Wanning disliked crowding among others, so he took out the gold pieces Chua Chengyong had sent and didn't hesitate. The servants of Chuanyuan Pavilion, who attended the guests, had made death pacts with the master of the pavilion, and thus would never divulge the personal information of any guest. Even so, Chu Wanning remained wary. He booked the booth with the best view and had the servant bring 2 pots of snowy fragrance tea, 8 pieces of fresh and candied fruit, 4 pastries, and 4 sweets, and then sent the servant away. Once he was alone with Moran in the room, Chu Wanning finally lowered his hood as he stood by the window, looking down at the masses of people below. According to the sect leader, Xuanruan will be auctioning off a weapon named Gulai. Gulai? Moran shook his head. Never heard of it. It's a holy weapon. Moran started. A holy weapon? But didn't Jincheng Lake? Indeed. Supposedly, this Gulai was found in a nameless grave in the Wanshan Mountains. Its master probably didn't have any heirs to pass it on to, and so he had it buried with him. I see. A holy weapon took only one master, the one who named it. Upon their death, it would accept their heirs. Even if someone else were to get their hands on the weapon, they would be unable to draw out even a tiny fraction of its true power. As far as Moran was concerned, there wasn't much point in buying a weapon like that. It's true that a holy weapon that doesn't acknowledge its wielder as its master won't display its true power. Chu Wanning said, having seen through his thoughts. Even then, it will be many times stronger than a normal weapon. These people would definitely go all out. Moran grasped the situation. I understand Shizun's meaning now. Most people go their whole lives without even seeing a holy weapon. Since this Guilai was found in a nameless grave, and an ages-old one at that, everyone here will very likely extend their spiritual energy to test it on the off chance they happen to be a descendant of its original user. There's no harm in trying after all. Precisely. Holy weapons are rarely even seen, but one without a master just so happens to pop up for sale right at this juncture? Moran continued contemplatively. No matter how you look at it, this has to be the work of that fake Gouchen. He's bringing out a high-quality counterfeit to bait everyone into exposing their spiritual energy so he can see if anyone here has the spiritual essence he's looking for. Chu Wanning sat down in a cushioned chair, poured himself a cup of snowy fragrance tea, and leisurely drank it. Then he looked at the swarm of people below and said in a quiet voice, It's exactly as you say. Regardless of whether the holy weapon is real or whether it's part of the fake Gouchen's scheme, it can't hurt to check. At that moment, there was a ruckus down below. Chu Wanning and Moran peered downward and were both caught off guard by what they saw. Chuanyuan Pavilion's golden gates stood wide open, and 2 rows of blue-robed young men with their hair done up in jade crowns were striding with their faces exposed through the crowd of cloaked cultivators, whose own faces were hidden under hoods. The one in the lead was slender and handsome, and he didn't bother with any form of concealment as he strolled right into the black market. Ye Wangqi? Moran uttered, surprised.